Hello, so in this video I'm going to be explaining how the circle of fifths can help with key signature and interval identification and construction. So the first step to learning the circle of fifths is memorizing this pattern, F, C, G, D, A, E, B. There are a lot of different ways to memorize this. You could use like a little acronym, like I use Father Charles goes down and ends battle. So this order is really important because this is your order of sharps. However, if you were to go with this same pattern but starting on the last one going up, you'd get the order of flats, which I remember it by saying bead and then G, C, F. So this is your order of flats. And this is really important because when you're constructing key signatures, these help show you what notes in the key signature have an accidental, what key signatures contain which specific accidentals, and so on. So if we were to take this pattern right here, starting on F, going to B, you might notice that these intervals right here, they are 5 letter names apart from each other. F, G, A, B, C, G, A, B, C, D, and so on. And these intervals are actually a perfect fifth. They're not just any fifth, they're a perfect fifth. So this is also really cool to memorize because it helps you learn what your perfect fifths are. And a similar thing applies to the order of flats, except all the notes are 4 letter names apart. B, C, D, E, E, F, G, A, and so on. And these are all a perfect fourth apart as well. So knowing your order of sharps and the order of flats helps you know your perfect fifths and perfect fourths. Before we get into the circle of fifths, let's continue by writing this pattern this way. That's not right. There we go, this way. And if you were to start on C, many of you know C major has no sharps and no flats. It's the key signature that contains all natural notes. So if you were to move to the right of this key, you'd get key signatures with sharps in them. If you were to move to the left, you'd get key signatures with flats in them. So how do you know where to go after B? How does that work? Well, before we get into that, it's also important to know that when you go from C, you're adding a sharp. If you're going to the right, you're adding 1 sharp to the key signature. G major has 1 sharp. D major has 2 sharps. A major has 3. But how do we know what notes in the key signature have the sharp in them? Well, first, let's take G major for example. One method I use to figure out what notes are sharp in, you could just go down a half step from the last note, which is G. G is the starting note. You could go down a half step and it would be some sort of F. And automatically you'd go, oh, that's F sharp. Because if you know F is a whole step down from G, F sharp would have to be a half step. But F is also right here on our little line of fifths. So if you were to go from G, skip 1 note and go to the next one, this would be your last sharp. So let's look at D. D has 2 sharps in the key signature because it's 2 notes up the circle of fifths or the line of fifths from C. If we were to go back 1, we're going to skip that 1, and 2, F and C would be your sharps because you're taking the last sharp and all the sharps behind it. Let's look at E. E would have 4 sharps in the key signature. So let's go 2 back, 1, 2, and all of these notes would be sharp in the key of E. And then we get to B, which has 5. we're gonna skip one, and A, D, G, C, and F will be sharp in the key of B. So what's next after B? Because if B has 5 sharps, could there be a key signature with 6? Yes, there can be key signatures with up to 7 sharps or flats. But how do we know what note is a perfect fifth up from B? It would have to be some sort of F, but we already have F natural here. So in order to figure that out, we'd use the same logic of flats going to the left and sharps going to the right. So if you were to keep this going, you'd repeat the same pattern of F, C, G, D, A, E, B, except you would add a sharp next to the notes, and so on. However, after C sharp, you will get into key signatures that don't technically exist in the type of music we are studying. So after B, you have F sharp major, which has 6 sharps, and then C sharp major, which has 7. A good method for learning how to identify C sharp major is if you see 7 sharps, that works, or if every note is sharpened, that would have to be C sharp. Because you're essentially taking C major and raising everything up by a half step, so putting a sharp next to every note. And if you were to keep going, you'd get into like double sharps and just key signatures that don't necessarily exist. You can also apply this same concept backwards with flats. So if you wanted to see what key signature is after F and has 2 flats, how would you figure that out? Well, you'd start your cycle again, but it'd have to be backwards, because you can't start the cycle going forwards again. You'd have to start it backwards, so this would be B flat, E flat. What's next? Next is A flat, and D flat, and so on. And for identifying how many flats are in each flat key signature, one way you could do it is by let's start with F. If we were going to find out what note in the key of F major has the flat accidental with it, what we do is we go 1 to the left, and that is our last flat. And this is the second, technically F, you just have to really know that F has 1 flat in it, and it's B flat. If we were to look at B flat, how to identify the last flat in B flat major? Because we know B flat is one of the flats in B major or B flat major because it's in the name. So if we go 1 over to the left, we land on E flat. So therefore E flat and B flat are the 2 flats in B flat major. So if we were to go to E flat and go 1 over, A flat would be the last flat, E flat would be the second to last flat, and that's why the key signature name is E flat major. So when you kind of understand this, you can write it out in a circle with C at the top. And this way you have your sharp keys, and this way you have your flat keys. And essentially you're just adding 1 sharp or 1 flat depending on whichever way you go. When you get to sort of the bottom of the circle, some notes are enharmonically equivalent, such as D flat and C sharp and B and C flat. It's also really important, just because the 2 notes sound the same doesn't necessarily mean that they are functioning in the same way. For example, the key signature for B major is 5 sharps, and the key signature for C flat is 7 flats. Totally different, but they just happen to have the same exact pitch. So how can we use this to identify key signatures? Well, we've done that, to identify intervals. We've kind of touched on key signatures, but now if we were to look at some examples of intervals, we can use these to identify them. So if we were to look at this one up here first, this is F going to B flat. All right, so the first method you could use was what we just talked about, using the key signature method. So if I were to write out my F, C, G, D, A, E, B, and then I'm going to start it backwards, going this way with flats next to the notes, B, E, A, D, G, C, and then I'm gonna add an F sharp and a C sharp on the end of this. Okay, so we're in the key of F major, or we're using the key of F major since F is our bottom pitch, and that's the pitch, that's a certain key signature we're going to be using. Hey Guy.
Hello.
I'm recording a video, but you're fine.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. This is for the theory class.
Oh, I'm so
No,
sorry.
you're good, you're good. You're in it. You might as well say hi.
I can't.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, you're good.
Well, wow.
It'll make sense.
I'm sure. I mean, circle of fifths, scales,
Yeah.
sharps, flats. It all makes
Intervals,
sense.
fun stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut your video.
No, you're fine, you're fine. It's like a fun little break
Mhm.
for me too, to kind of understand what I'm
I
trying to
thought
say.
you were having DA session.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were talking, I was like, oh, my bad.
No, you're good, don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh.
It'll be fine. Do you know what the time is by any chance?
It's 7:03.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Have the video.
Yeah. So if we're looking in the context of F major, how do we know what kind of interval B flat would be? So the first thing we need to do is figure out the size of the interval. We can do that by just counting the letters, F, G, A, B. It'd be some kind of fourth, because they're 4 letter names apart. We can also figure that out by going this way in the line of fourths and fifths, or fourths and fifths, to figure out what B flat, well, it kind of already tells us actually, because if you were to use this and go back a space, you're going back a perfect fourth, you would see the relationship between F and B flat as a perfect fourth. So you can just go ahead and write perfect fourth. But if you weren't doing that method and just relying on the key signature method, you could figure, okay, so C is here. C has no sharps, no flats, all natural notes. If we were to go 1 over to the left, that is adding 1 flat to the key signature. So how do we figure out what note in the key signature of F is flat? We will go over 1 space to the left again. Therefore, B flat is the only note in the F major scale that is flatted. So if we look back over here at our interval, F to B flat, oh, B flat is in the key signature of F. That means it has to be a perfect fourth. Because if it were not in the key signature of F and it was a fourth, it would have to be an augmented or diminished fourth. But that's not what we're dealing with because B flat is in the key signature. So let's look at the next one. We have A going to C natural. Okay, let's try using the key signature method for this one. So we're going to start again on C, on our line over here. We're going to go over to A. We're gonna add 1 sharp for every note we go through. G, 1 sharp. D, 2 sharps. And A, 3 sharps. All right, so how do we know which notes are sharpened in the key of A? What we're gonna do is we're gonna go back 2 letter names in this. 1 and then 2. So G sharp will be the last sharp. And we're gonna go back 2 more to figure out that F and C are the other sharp notes in the key of A. So if we look back at the interval, A and then C. Oh wait, C natural is not in the key signature of A. We just said it's sharpened in the key signature of A. So how do you get rid of a sharpened note? You'd put a natural sign next to it, which is lowering it by 1/2 step. So we know that this will be some kind of third because they're 3 letter names apart. And this would have to be a minor third because you're taking the major third, which is A to C sharp, and you're lowering it by a half step. So you're going A to C, which is a minor third. All right, and let's go to the next one. We're going from D to G. All right, so if you count on your hand, D, E, F, G, this would have to be some kind of fourth. All right, so we could use the key signature method for this as well, or we can use the order of sharps and flats. And I think it's easier to use the order of sharps and flats for this. So I've written F, C, G, D, A, E, B. I'm gonna start on D, right here. So if you were to go one space over to the left, there's G, just like over here. And we know that if you were to go to the left in the circle or the line of fifths, you'd be going in the interval of a perfect fourth. So that's how we know that this is a perfect fourth. Or alternatively, you could use the key signature method to figure out that D has 2 sharps in the key signature. And to find out what the sharps are, you skip one going to the left, and you include these last 2. Or they would be these last 2. For using that method to figure out what sharps are in the key, F would be the first sharp, always, because G major has 1 sharp, and it's F sharp. And this applies to every key, every sharp key going forward. F will always be first. So there's no way you can have a B flat sharp in a key signature. You'd have to always start on F. And we can see that G is not sharpened in the key of D. G is natural, so this would be a perfect fourth. All right, so for this last one, this interval is going up to a lower one. It's going down to a lower one. So for these kinds of intervals, you're going to want to start at the bottom note and identify that relationship going up. It's almost as if it's backwards. You could easily write this again as this, and you'd be doing the same thing. So we're starting on the pitch E, going to C natural. So let's do the key signature method for this. We're starting on E. It is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from C, so it has 4 sharps. And to figure out what those sharps are, we're gonna skip 1 and count 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so D is the last sharp. We also have G sharp, C sharp, and F sharp. So this C is natural, and in the key of E, we have C sharp. So this is going to be some sort of minor relationship because we're taking C sharp and lowering it down by a half step by making it C natural. So now we have to figure out the size, or alternatively, you could figure out the size first. So just count E, F, G, A, B, C. That's 6, so this would be a minor 6th. Okay, awesome. That's it.